Welcome to a Thanksgiving edition of a football show. That is Nick Suss of the Tennessean. I am Braden Gall, and we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Obviously, happy Thanksgiving to you, Nick. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Braden? Happy Thanksgiving.
I'm doing well. I have two kids out of school today, running around the house. So if the fire alarms start to go off during the show, it's not my fault. We got a lot of stuff to get to today. Obviously, we're recording this a day early. Hopefully, you guys have time to consume this content before college football starts and before the Titans on Sunday and during your holiday vacation week or whatever it is you might be doing. So hope you guys all have a great Thanksgiving out there. Hopefully you ordered some Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. By the way, the hats are spectacular over at Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Hopefully you ordered some of that. I'm going to go pick it up today on Wednesday, bring it home. Got my mom making a pie. You know, we got brisket, we got smoked turkey. I can't wait for the turkey sandwiches for Friday and Saturday and Sunday football. Just what a great day. Like what a great weekend. My favorite holiday, Nick. I don't know where it ranks in your holidays. But
second or third, very high.
What's number one?
I am a big New Year's Eve guy for sentimental reasons. As it gets closer, I can tell you my many New Year's Eve stories that just delight me.
So it's like personal friendships and memories and stuff. It's not like because you just like to party with a bunch of amateurs.
Yeah. It has nothing to you know me. I'm not a party person. It is a sentimental thing.
You're not running around with like dressed up on Broadway, like taking shots and having a good old time. It's not your thing.
No, I can't remember the last time I took a shot. It is purely a sentimental thing.
What's funny is, so my wife and I met on at a New Year's Eve party, so we've got a little sentiment in our New Year's holiday as well. My favorite reason, and so this is where Sinkers and Shotgun Willie's and the Titans and college football all come in together into my favorite holiday, which is I love rivalry weekend. It's the last weekend of the regular season this year because it's a little bit later. We've got huge games in the NFL, but we have 5 straight nights of football to watch on the television, and then you go with one of my favorite meals of the year. It's about spending. Here's the other thing. There's no obligations on Thanksgiving. This is what I love about Thanksgiving. There's no obligations. Like I don't have to like be somewhere to do something. There's no like religious connotation to it. It's just like, this is about giving thanks and loving the people you're with and watching football and probably drinking stuff from Sinkers. Like that's what this is about this whole weekend. So that's why I love it so much. Food, family, football, and drinking. There you go. Okay, so we'll get to the SEC schedule. Some of the rankings are out. Lots of fun. I've got my Egg Bowl t-shirt on today. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, I've got my Everything is Mississippi on shirt, which is in honor of the Egg Bowl this weekend. So, and again, we are recording this on Wednesday. So if there's some news about the injuries for the Titans that come out over the course of the next few days, we just wanted you to have the show if you're driving this holiday weekend. So we wanted to do it a little early. And, Nick's busy. You're a busy guy coming up on Thursday and Friday. You got stuff going on, right? Friendsgiving, is that what's going on? Or you got family?
No, family. We're going to have 13 people here, I think, in a house that probably can fit 10. So we'll see how that works. But, yeah.
They're not staying with you overnight, are they?
Half are getting hotels.
Okay.
Yeah, people are figured to arrive within the hour. So if somebody shows up during the show, I ignore them and I finish the show. You got to get the rep. You can't be distracted.
Stay focused. Stay focused.
You got to stay in the zone. But yeah, people come
That's very exciting. And if you need any supplies for those people that are coming into town for family, for in-laws, whatever it might be, Sinkers Beverages, award-winning liquor store, 4 years in a row, as chosen by you, the Nashvillians, the best liquor store in the city, serving the community for almost as long as I've been alive. I have technically been alive longer than they have been in business in East Nashville, which is a little concerning for me, but a nice compliment to them. Their sister store in Hendersonville, of course, as well, Bluegrass Beverages up there as well. So make sure you check both of them out. Award-winning. And just great local businesses run by local folks. Great options, beer, wine, tequila, bourbon, you name it. They've got you covered over there. And both Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages, really good merch. So if you want a little stocking stuffer and you like, food and beer, go get some merch from Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's. Good stocking stuffer stuff, which is something we're all going to have to think about coming up. All right, before we get to the SEC, I want to talk Titans and Commanders. We're also going to get into a conversation about Will Levis, of course, because we can't do a show without talking about his progress and the progress-o-meter, right, is, I believe, what we've got with you. But also, yeah. I think these are two teams that have done one of the better jobs drafting this past year. In particular, I think Washington has been great. I think the Titans have been better than people think. But I got some numbers to float, and we'll discuss that a little bit later on. First of all, we were talking before the show. This is one of the more unpredictable matchups I think we've seen. The Commanders have lost 3 straight. They have a lot of really interesting trends that make it concerning for the Titans. They also have some interesting trends that make it opportunistic for the Titans. Where are you on the general matchup between Tennessee and Washington on Sunday?
The only thing I feel pretty confident saying is that this is going to be a close game. I think 6 of Washington's last 7 have been 1-score games. All 4 of the last 4 Titans games have been 10 points or fewer. Like, I don't think this is going to be a rout in either direction. I think these are 2 teams that, by their design, play close and try to finish. And Washington has been better at finishing this year, ostensibly. But it's really tough to say because one team's trending up, one team's trending down. Have they trended to a point where they're equal yet? I don't necessarily think so. But the things that Washington struggles with, especially their run defense, give the Titans a chance to play the game they want to play. If the Titans can control tempo here, can let Tony Pollard take over, can slow the game down and decrease the number of possessions that Washington offense gets, I can see a path to the Titans making some noise in this game. By the flip side, I think the Commanders had 3 turnovers last week, had 5 the entire season before that. If last week was a fluke and they can keep playing the special teams they play well, keep the ball safe, and the Titans have been pretty bad against running quarterbacks this year. If you want to remember, Malik Willis and Tyler Huntley and Drake May and Justin Herbert, all these guys were averaging 5+ yards per carry as a quarterback. So you put all that together, it doesn't seem good. So really, really tough to make a balance. I think the Titans offense is going to have some chances in this one, but the defense might have some difficulties.
Yeah, that was the thing. Walking away studying Washington for a minute, I came away with the best unit in the game, which is something I always do with like college football, right? It's like if you're unsure about what you think is going to happen in a game, you kind of go, what is the most predictable, most dependable, and best unit in this game? And it's probably Washington's offense. But if that's being led by a rookie quarterback who around this time of the year, rookie quarterbacks tend to start to get, like, defensive coordinators get more tape on them. Things start to get a little difficult. You're playing a longer season than you've ever played before. And they've turned the ball over. They've lost 3 straight. They've turned the ball over 5 times in those 3 losses. They had only turned the ball over 3 times total in the first 9 games. But I do think the Washington offense is the most dependable and most effective and most productive unit in the game. So I do feel like that's the starting point with all of this. But I don't think their defense is very good. Look at their wins.
No,
they won a lot. They won a lot of games. They beat the Giants twice, Carolina, Cleveland. I mean, those are 4 wins over 3 of the worst teams. Chicago, Arizona, Cincinnati are their wins. Look, I can argue that Arizona and Cincinnati are better than maybe their record indicates, or better than they were at the beginning or of the season. But like, you know, those are still all teams with. I think Arizona's the only one with like a semi, even close to winning record. The other ones are all bad teams, and then they play Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Philly, and they get beat. So I think there's opportunity for Will Levis. I was checking out some Washington content, Nick, around the interwebs, always a safe and not dangerous thing at all. The way people talk about Will Levis in this offense, it's pretty bad. the way people scout this team is pocket presence is atrocious, footwork is terrible, accuracy is bad, and decision making is poor. And it's like, well, none of that's all that unfair, but it also. But it also feels like the
accuracy thing is unfair. He's very accurate this season. But
this season he has been. But ultimately, what I was going to say is I feel like that is it's not lazy, because a lot of that is those are his sort of like issues, but those not necessarily have been the issues all at once, and they've not been the issues the last few weeks. Certainly, pocket presence could have been better against Houston, right? So there's turnovers were way worse early in the year, despite the fact that they had a pick 6 and a fumble last week. So I think it's a little unfair to Levis and Titans offense to do that over the last 3 weeks. I think it's fair to talk about this team holistically that way, though.
You earn the right for people to not talk crap about you. And look, we can get into this more. I spent a lot of time digging into second-year quarterbacks who have had a 3-game stretch as good as the one Will Levis just did. And over the last 24 years, or however long, this century, there are only 9 other second-year quarterbacks who've had a 3-game stretch with the numbers that Will Levis just put up. If you combine passer rating and yards per attempt and completion percentage and all of these things that he's touchdowns, interceptions, all the things that he's putting together counting stats-wise, There's only 9 others. Levis is the only one of that 10-person sample that didn't go 3-0 or 2-1 in that 3-game stretch. Like, he's playing well, and you give him credit, but the team is also 1-2 in these games. And you could say maybe they should have beaten Minnesota, or maybe they should have beaten the Chargers. They didn't. Those were 10-point games. They weren't one-score games. They ended up being.
It was the officials, Nick. We've already been over this. It was the officials.
They didn't win them. But you look at the underlying contributing factors to what Will Levis is doing. It is easy to be impressed with the passer rating of 105 or whatever it is, 9.6 yards per attempt over this stretch, completing, I believe, 67, 68% of his passes. Like, he is doing the sorts of things that the quarterbacks you would want him to be compared to did. The other quarterbacks recently who have done this sort of thing, these numbers, are Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, and then Patrick Mahomes and Mitchell Trubisky. I bring up the first 3. I bring up Goff. I bring up Mahomes. Mahomes, Purdy, Goff, and Burrow, because those are the guys from the system that Callahan is trying to instill. Okay. It is the McVay, it's the Shanahan of the world. It's when you have a second-year quarterback coached by Sean McVay, coached by Kyle Shanahan, coached by Zach Taylor. Obviously, Matt LaFleur has not had a second-year quarterback, and Mike McDaniel hasn't had a second-year quarterback. I don't think Kevin O'Connell's had a second-year quarterback. It's not really a fair transfer for everybody yet.
Well, does Jordan Love count as a second-year quarterback?
he can if you want, but no, he doesn't. So when you look at the people who are in the same age of trajectory as Levis is, in offenses similar to what Callahan is trying to instill, Levis is putting up the requisite numbers. He's doing the sorts of things that Purdy was able to do, the sorts of things that Burrow was able to do, the sorts of things that Goff was able to do. Now, the team's just not winning. So you give them credit for the quarterback putting up the counting stats that you're supposed to in this offense, but the counting stats haven't meant wins necessarily, and that needs to be the next factor.
Okay, so let me make sure everyone hears the numbers correctly and accurately. Over the last 24 years, Will Levis is a top 10 quarterback over a 3-game span of all second-year quarterbacks. Is that correct?
Yes.
Look, mine's got sponsorship.
Yours has got sponsorship. We'll sell that. The full list of quarterbacks. I only gave the ones from these last couple of years. Let me click over to the computer link. It's going so slow. This is why I write things down instead of trusting my computer. Writing things down is so much better.
Weren't there trucks all driving around like all American cities with like Geek Corner written on them, where they go solve your problems with your computer? I feel like that was something that took place.
Maybe
Geek Squad. Geek Squad.
2020
is what it was called.
Geek Squad. Yeah. 2023 Brock Purdy, 2021 Joe Burrow, 2018 both Patrick Mahomes and Mitchell Trubisky, 2017 Jared Goff, 2016 Marcus Mariota, 2013 Nick Foles, 2013 Russell Wilson, 2000 Dante Culpepper. So those other 9 quarterbacks, 8 of them are Pro Bowlers. 3 of them won Super Bowls. Another 3, I believe, have lost Super Bowls. So you've got 6 out of 9 having been to a Super Bowl. 3 of them.
And the other one's Mitch Trubisky.
The other one is Marcus Mariota.
Oh, whoa, come on.
Trubisky,
he won playoff game.
Trubisky did, in fact, make a Pro Bowl. That is what I mean by the other one. Marcus is the only one that never made a Pro Bowl. He made a Pro Bowl in year 2, I believe. But yeah, that is the group. And the qualifiers I used, for those of you who maybe I talked through it way too fast, but it's completion percentage of 68 or better, passing yards of 748 or more, 9.59 yards per attempt or better, 5 touchdowns or more, 2 interceptions or fewer. Those 5 criteria over a 3-game stretch as a second-year quarterback.
I love it. That's a major Geek Corner right there.
And that is the sort of thing that if you pay for the Tennessean, you can read 3 days early. Wrote that on Monday. Go ahead and check it out.
There you go, Tennessean.com. Go pay for good journalism, of course. That was Geek Corner, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue.
And I think we'll have another one later, right? Don't you have something you want to talk about?
I do. We'll have a second trip into the corner. We're running a 4-corner offense today on the show. That's what we're doing. So look, here's the other glaring. So I also saw some content around Washington folks this week, talking fairly disparagingly about the PFF scores of the Titans offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hard to defend. I think it was NPF was listed at 72 out of 75 tackles. It's pretty bad.
A little better than I thought, to be honestly. I do not know who has been worse on a just eye test level this year.
Brunskill is like 31 out of 38, but again, that's he's a backup. It's
small
fine.
Sample,
yeah, and a small sample. So the point is 20 sacks in the last 3 games. Over that same 3 games you're talking about, they have given up 20 sacks, and I don't have to repeat that number, but it's the 3rd time this year that the Titans have allowed at least 7 sacks of just Will Levis in a game. And like, while the second half, I'd like to get your thoughts on this because Paul and I were talking about it on Monday. I looked at the drive chart in the second half, and it did feel like post pick 6 that they went into a shell play calling wise to just make sure they didn't like crush the confidence of the O-line and the quarterback. It felt very conservative, and they figured out a way to make a huge play with Chig, and the defense got some timely stops. The defense actually played very, very well in the second half. If you look at their drive chart for the Texans, I think it was 6 out of 8 drives went less than 10 yards in the second half.
And I think probably more impressively to that, the Texans crossed the 50 3 times in the fourth quarter and got 3 points out of it.
Yeah, like one or 2 long drives the whole game. I mean, the Titans gave them short fields, but so I'm curious. Like, obviously they did something in the second half. Levis was getting the ball out quicker. I mean, how do you translate? How do you take that game plan? Because again, that Washington's got a nice little defensive front, but they're not special like Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter and like these guys. I'm curious how you think their game plan and their adjustment in the second half could translate to a full game plan of keeping Will Levis protected. Some of that, of course, on Sunday was absolutely Levis needing to not step into the pass rush or throw the ball away when he knows it's coming. Certainly there were 2 or 3 that were not on him at all. They were on just J.C. Latham getting cooked by great players. So I'm curious what you think about the adjustment in the second half and how they can translate that moving forward to protect their quarterback.
Like, part of me thinks that the Titans' entire game plan for year 1 in Callahan has been build a lead and then take your kickball and go home. Like, they admitted as much in that first win against Miami, and we've seen them try and replicate that time and time and time again. And it didn't work against Chicago, and it didn't work against the Jets. And we can rehash all the fourth quarter stuff we've talked about all year, but like, I think that the game plan is almost always going to amount to, this team is confident it can score quick. This team is very confident that it can come out and build a first quarter lead. They think if you have that first quarter lead, slow the game down, trust the defense. I was reading something the other day, I think it was on The Ringer, and they were discussing John Harbaugh and what makes him such a interesting coach to talk to through the lens of an analytics guru. Because some years he'll go for it on 4th down every time, and some years he'll punt every time. And it's tough to reconcile that. And they were making the argument that John Harbaugh makes his decisions purely based on, does he think his offense is better than his defense, or does he think his defense is better than his offense? I'll go for it if I think the offense is better, and I'll punt if I think the defense is better. And I think that this Titans season has very much been a clinic in trusting the defense. The defense is the better unit on average this year. So if you have that lead, if the offense has done enough to put you in position to let the defense win the game, they let the defense win the game. And so I think that's what they've been trying to do. And I think that's what the second half strategy is when you talk about being very defensive and not letting the quarterback beat him and not letting the offensive line beat itself. That's what it is. It's a process of the offense did enough. Now let's put the game in the hands of the unit that seemingly deserves more trust.
I think that seemingly is doing a lot of work in that sentence, which I think is, I'm glad that you put it in there, because while like the lead against Miami, I think was just sort of insurmountable. I don't know if the defense did anything particular as much as they were playing against a JV like MAC team at that point. The New England game, I will say, I think the defense got the stops it needed against Houston, and I think it's the first time they've done that. I agree with your point about how they lean on the defense in critical spots. The problem is the defense has given up the game a few times, and
Sure.
while the defense metric wise is solid, like they gave up the big plays against the Jets, they gave up the big plays with leads in other situations, and so while they seemingly do trust the defense, and yes, the defense is the better unit. So to your point, it is the Harbaugh ethos of like trust the thing that you have more faith in. It just hasn't delivered when it was supposed to a couple of different times. It did against Houston on Sunday. So we'll see. I think there's a real chance that the Titans can win the football game. I think Levis playing well against a Commanders defense that is a little bit kind of smoke and mirrors. I mean, you look at the numbers that they've given up on the ground. This is what I was going to ask you, kind of transitioning from how do you slow down a pass rush. You do that with Tony Pollard, frankly.
Yeah.
And they gave up 228 to the Eagles, 140 to the Steelers, 164 to the Giants, 202 to the Bears, 176 to the Ravens, and 181 to the Cardinals over the last 8 games. That is a lot of yards on the ground. And so I do think that I was thinking about this, like what's the over-under total touches for Pollard and Ridley that would make you feel like they're in a good position? And it's like, I think you like getting upwards of 30 touches for the two of them is not out of the question. Like, yeah, I know that's a high number, but like 25 touches for the two of them should not be out of the question. They're the best 2 offensive weapons. They're the best 2 players on the team right now on offense. You got to feed those guys the ball.
Yeah. The number that popped into my head when you said that was 26.5. That's where I'll set it.
I'm on board with that. I think they win the game if they're over 26.5. I really do. Because, I mean, you hit Ridley early, you challenge him early, loosens up things for Pollard. You can hit Ridley underneath on the bootlegs, and then all of a sudden you go back to the deep shots. You use Ridley as a decoy then with NWI. It sets up the whole game. The playbook opens up when you have Ridley and Pollard doing what they do. So not Dan rocket Quinn science here. But
Dan Quinn is such an interesting coach because, like, it's not often that a defensive head coach has multiple coaching stints where he wins with offense. Like his great skill, it seems, is identifying really good offensive coordinators to hire and run the offense while he runs the defense. Because those Falcons defenses statistically weren't super great. And this Commanders defense is a bit of a work in progress right now. But dude has an eye for being able to hire Kyle Shanahan or Cliff Kingsbury or this. It's kind of like the inverse of, oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name now. The Ravens coach in the early 2000s, pre-Harbaugh.
Oh, God, I am blanking on his name, too. I keep thinking of Tom Coughlin, but it's not. He's like another version. Brian Billick.
Brian Billick was an offensive coach. He had an offensive background, but they won with Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and all this stuff. Of like that's just good defensive coach hiring and defensive player acquisition.
Dan Quinn, what is the secret to your success? Well, I had the greatest quarterback in the history of the franchise, both times. I mean, look, it's a little premature for Daniels, obviously, but like, is Mark Rypien the best quarterback for Washington since Jaden Daniels? Like, who's been a better quarterback? Like, Robert Griffin had a nice year, but who's been a better quarterback?
We don't need to get into Kirk defense right quick, but they've had a lot of good quarterbacks in franchise.
Okay.
They've had Doug Williams and Joe Theismann.
Right. Like those guys were all before Mark. Those guys were before Mark Rypien.
I thought you were just saying best ever. I'm like Sammy.
No,
Ball.
I said since Rypien.
Since Mark Rypien. Okay, I see your point. It's not.
I think Daniels could be the best quarterback in 30 years for this franchise. That's all.
It's not Donovan McNabb's 2 years there.
And while Cousins was great, they didn't want him. They let him go. All right, but I mean, Matt Ryan, I think it's pretty safe to say Matt Ryan's, Matt Ryan, Michael Vick, 2 best quarterbacks in Falcons history, I would say pretty safely.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Do you want to get into the drafted rookies, or do you want to finalize the predictions here?
I'll throw a number out if you want me to.
All right. Sure.
27-23 Commanders. I think it's close. I waffled on this for so long. This has been the hardest game for me to predict all year because there is a sinking feeling in my gut that the Titans should win this one, but I still don't know if I have the confidence in them to say that they will.
Well, and one of the things I said on Monday, and it's you have to you collect enough data in a football season that you start to make definitive statements about things, right? That's what you do. And I do feel like one of the things that I'm ready to make a definitive statement on is that, and it's not really definitive. It's sort of, I'm couching it a little bit here. but that is that if Will Levis makes the progress over the last 6 games that he has made over the first, let's say, 7 or 8 games of his season starting on the field, then I think he has proven, or at least earned, a clear shot to be the quarterback next year. It doesn't mean he's going to be the quarterback long term, but he's been given they don't need to go draft somebody if he continues to make the progress. Make the team around the quarterback better in the draft and in the offseason. Bring in maybe, and PK's on this, a big one, like bring in a veteran quarterback to compete with Levis and be a backup who's maybe a little bit better than Mason Rudolph, and give yourself a chance to continue to improve the roster wholesale across the board while Levis, once again, has to show you if he's a long-term answer or not, trying to earn a contract. I feel pretty comfortable about that, but he has to then continue the progress. So like this game is a big starting point to that. I don't think the defense is all that special. You're coming off the best win of your career, probably, I think pretty clearly the best win of your career as a quarterback. Not the best performance, but the best win of your career. The offense played very, very well in the first half, probably the best offensive performance of the season. You're catching a team that's trending downward, playing a rookie quarterback. I just think this is your opportunity to sort of prove that the progress is real. I don't think that has to translate to a win, but I think you need to continue to see the progress and all those numbers you talked about over the 3-game stretch with him. I think the key here is the big turnover. If they do not make the big turnover, I think they win the game. I think that's the difference here. It's the turnover thing. If they keep it clean, a clean sheet, as we say in football, if they keep a clean sheet, I think there's a chance that they win the game in the fourth quarter. If they have to overcome for 2 weeks in a row on the road against a quality team and a good offense and a good quarterback, another big time sort of fatalist kind of mistake, that's where I don't think they are good enough yet to stack wins. That's where I'm at on that.
I agree with you. This is an interesting one because I keep reverting back to what did I pick in May? Like a lot of these times I think back, let's stop overthinking this. What did I think was going to happen in May? And the thing I thought was
in this game or in the whole season?
This game. Like every game, I predicted and put a lot of thought into like, well, what's going to happen on December 1st? What's going to happen on December 8th? And back in May, my thought was, this is a Commanders team that's going to be learning how to play just like the Titans are. The Commanders probably aren't going to be that good, but they'll figure things out. And this is the time of year where a young quarterback figures something out. And since Jaden Daniels was so far ahead of schedule, it's really tough to forget that this is a Commanders team that's still figuring itself out. That's still, I would argue, at a talent deficiency to the Titans. I would say the Titans probably have more overall talent than the Commanders do. If you look up and down that Commanders roster, there's not a lot of like A1 caliber players. If you go position by position, if it's Tony Pollard versus Brian Robinson, you probably take Pollard in a smidge.
Take Pollard.
If it's Ridley versus McLaurin, that's really close. You probably take McLaurin. I'm taking their quarterback, their offensive line, their tight ends. And then on the defense, I think the Titans have a pretty distinct edge in a lot of places.
Okay.
So I don't know. Again, it's really, really tough to say. But
if the Titans are fully healthy in the secondary, I might agree with you.
Sure.
I might agree with you. But is Lattimore's playing, right?
I think he
for
is.
Washington?
This should be his second game, I think.
They've got they're better at that position for sure. But Lattimore could be the reason. Like, so the two alarm bells that I have going off in my head are sort of like if Lattimore is capable of just shutting down Ridley, which I don't know if anybody is capable of, but I know Sauce did a pretty good job on him back in that game. He caught like a crossing route against Sauce Gardner early in the Jets game, and then like wasn't heard from for the rest of the game. That was before they sort of had a rhythm like they do now. Callahan had kind of, to your point, learned how to be a coordinator and call plays, and Levis has learned the system, and Ridley's learned how to run. Like all of it's kind of coming together, right? The other big giant alarm bell was the 2 block kicks. Yes, last week, even in a loss for Washington, they created 2 short fields. They didn't capitalize on it, which is why they lost. But they blocked a field goal and a punt. That's the flashing neon sign in my head. That's like they don't have an egregious special teams error, aka a turnover, aka a blocked kick, or a long return. Then they can win the game. But I don't know if they can overcome too many of those things on the road. So
sure.
I'm gonna go a tie just for fun.
Love it. That's my favorite thing in the world. Have we talked about how much I want to see a tie?
22-22.
It's the only thing I want out of this life. I root for ties every game.
Well, do you know the last time the Titans have had? You're on the wrong beat, dude.
Like 73, right?
1971, I think, is the last. Yeah. I think is the last tie.
I want it so bad. I love ties. I think more sports should have ties.
Well, okay, so number one, Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. This is going to be the ad. We're going to do this in the ad. I'd like to know. I'd like to know, like, so what is it about the end of, so I'm thinking through it from a media perspective. Like, you're going to sit down and you're going to write a story. You're going to go to a press conference and you're going to ask questions about this. Are you just like peppier walking in there because it's a tie? Like, what is it about the tie that makes the story writing and the interviewing process more interesting to you?
The novelty, for sure, but I'm talking about it more from the way my brain gets tickled way of, like, the whole purpose of a regular season is to determine which teams make the postseason. And if you give full credit for a win and full credit for a loss to teams that play equally, you have inaccurately determined how that game should be valued. If two teams play equally, if 60 minutes end and the two teams have drawn, you should give each of them half credit, because that is a more accurate way to determine which teams go to the postseason. If we're doing it just for the sham of we like closure, sure, but that's way too individualistic of an approach when it comes to looking at the big picture of a season. Oh, I don't like the way this feels. I don't feel closure. The closure comes at the end of the year when somebody wins the Super Bowl. Like, what's the point of forcing closure?
I feel like you're making the case for the playoff committee to decide things based on eye test.
Sure. What's wrong with eye test?
No, I agree with you. In fact, I think the eye test, so many times the eye test gets dragged through the mud as some like idiotic, stupid way to evaluate things, when in fact you're right. Like, I watched two teams. Team B might have played a far better football game, but they get a kick blocked and all of a sudden the other team wins and you're like, scoreboard, baby. But you're like, actually, I watched the game and the other one looked better.
It's like, this is such an off-topic argument, but it's something that I say over and over again of, like, I remember watching Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in the 2000s. And I was there, and I remember that we all agreed who was better. And now 15 years later, we no longer agree on the thing we all agreed on.
You're saying we all agreed Peyton was better.
Yeah, everybody in 2006 or 2004 or 2009 or whatever year you picked, other than 2007, everybody always agreed Peyton was better.
Wrong Manning was better on that year, but it's okay.
Yeah. And then 15 years later, we just all collectively ignore that we all saw it. And it's like, if you watch a game that should be a tie and you're like, oh, this team won, give them 100% credit. No, we saw it. We saw one team be better than the other team. We saw one quarterback be better than the other quarterback. This isn't anti-analytics. This isn't anti-understanding the game better. It's just realize that when you see something, it's okay to say, I saw that. And when I see two teams that should have tied, I want them to tie.
You have largely just explained since 2014 my life's experience trying to talk to college football fans about rankings. It's like no, did you watch the football game? Like, they played in a conference championship game. It's number 2 versus number 4 in the SEC title game, and they played to the final possession. They played a basically even game. So why would this team fall 6 spots in the rankings while that team goes on to play for a championship when they played a football game that we all acknowledge was basically even? And if anything, losing that close game to a great team actually confirms to me that team that lost belongs in the conversation. And everyone's like, well, that's why they play the games, Braden. That's why they play the games. They got to play the games. The outcome has to determine the game. That's like, okay, all right.
Yeah, if we want to get real spicy, I would be okay with point differential being more important than final record. Like, if we want to talk about how actually the games are valued, winning by a lot is more impressive than winning.
Well,
but we're not ready to talk about that.
I am. Oh, I'm so ready to talk about that. I've talked about game control more than I'm supposed to, because I think like India. Not to get back to college football, but this is how my brain works, because it's subjective. The whole point of the NFL is, I think the difference in your argument between college and pro is that the schedules in the NFL are identical. Mm-hmm. People like to say that one team had a tougher schedule, and I just got done saying that the Commanders had beaten a bunch of bad teams, and that may be true, but at the end of the day, the talent gap between Team 1 and Team 32 and the schedule that you play and the schedule that I play, there is no difference. There's no There's no daylight between those schedules. When you compare it to college football, the schedules are so vastly different and so designed on like, arbitrary geographic terms 100 years ago. Like it's just not. It's not the way to determine who is better. But if you look at Indiana, for example, who is lower in the rankings than a lot of teams in the SEC, because their schedule isn't as hard, but they were totally dominant in most of those games. So if you're going to be totally dominant, I think that's where a human being with a sentient brain can watch the Indiana Hoosiers and be like, well, they've crushed people. Sure, it wasn't a great schedule, but they dominated. They never even trailed until like week 9 or 10, like in a game. And so you should give credit to that. And I don't think that's the same in the NFL, but I do think that in college football, the ability to be subjective and look at this stuff, and we're going to talk about the college game in just a second, like it's okay to use some logic and just be like, no, I just watched 2 really evenly matched teams play. So one of them had to win, had to win. Or whatever. So are you not? So you're not one of the. What happens when somebody says like, "Oh, what's the point of playing the game if you're not going to determine a winner? It's kissing your sister." Or blah 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 blah. Like what about all the American football fans who hate draws in soccer?
There is no imperative to force a winner unless the game dictates who moves on to the next round. Like unless you are complex. In a playoff format. There is no imperative to say a team needed to win. This is a relatively modern invention. There is more history of organized football where there is not overtime than there is with overtime.
I know.
Let's not pretend that overtime wasn't a thing that was just invented out of necessity because teams needed to keep playing in a 1962 game or whatever it was. I can't remember the exact history. I'm sorry.
When was overtime in college football? Was it like 2006?
I think it was the mid 90s, I want to say. Let's say like 95. Okay. But you look at the necessity for overtime. We are only doing it to satisfy victims of the moment. If the goal
now we're victims?
Yes, because it's like, oh, I need to know who would win. I need to know who's better.
Dude, you nailed it. Fully, it was voted on in 95 and it was adopted in 96. You nailed that shit. Way to go, dude.
That weird memory. But it's
you spent way too many Thanksgivings at a gas station in Biloxi, Mississippi.
I want the postseason to as accurately reflect what the regular season was as possible. It's my big problem. Generally with overtime, almost every sport changes the rules of the game they just played in order to make overtime work. And that's a different game.
Is basketball then the best version?
That's one of the best ones. Baseball pre-Ghost Runner was the best version because you just keep playing until somebody wins. But that puts a huge advantage on the home team, obviously. I think basketball is the best version of the overtime. If you're talking about accurately portraying the real version in the extra time. And honestly, I think the NFL has done a good job of trying to implement that, right? Like they've changed the rules. Hey, if we kick a field goal, you get to have another chance. Like they've done a good job of trying to at least incorporate more like actual football into it. The best version of overtime, and I'm going to spoil this for everybody, is no overtime. Just tie. Just let them tie.
That's not fun. That's not as
fun.
So fun.
It's so fun.
No.
It is so great to shake your hand and be like, wow, these two teams are exactly the same. That's the best.
No, the merits of your argument about determining the postseason and the merits of like accurately portraying what happened in the game as even, I think the merits of your argument are totally sound. And I don't disagree with your argument on either of them. It's just not as fun.
Have you never dreamed,
it's not as fun.
Have you never dreamed of flipping a coin and having it land on its side?
I've never woken up from slumber to thinking about a coin landing on its side. No.
That's the coolest thing you can imagine.
Have I considered it? Yes. During my waking time, generally involving mind-altering substances in college.
That's the crazy thing about this. This is 100% sober thoughts. This is just the way my brain works.
Have you ever seen a quarter land on its side, man? Whoa, it's wild. No, would you say the funnest thing you can imagine? Like not true. Not true.
Oh,
I could name things. I can name things right now that are more fun to imagine.
Try me.
Things I don't want to talk about on the podcast.
Just sounds like a coward's way out.
No, skydiving. I think about skydiving, and it's more fun. It's more fun.
Let me ask you this though: would you consider it to be a tie between like smoked brisket and smoked turkey?
It depends. Are we talking about Thanksgiving meal? It's turkey.
I'm
if we're
just
talking about cold
segue back into the
I hear you. If it's about Thanksgiving meal, I want turkey. If it's about a sandwich, I want turkey. If it's any other meal of the regular calendar, period of time, I would go brisket. So in theory, I think it's like 352 to 2-1. So there's a tie in there somewhere. Perfect. Between brisket and turkey. Yeah. But it sounds like brisket in my book is subjectively by an eye test and taste test superior to the turkey. But on Thanksgiving,
have any recommendations where people can go to get that?
There, I do actually. I'm glad you asked. Yeah. There's a place. It's right off Briley Parkway. I'm telling you guys, it's really good. If you haven't heard of it, it's right up there off Briley. Super easy to get to. Kind of between Madison and East Nashville. Really accessible if you work or operate or live in the downtown area or anywhere else in the city. What's the Shotgun Willie's Barbecue is the place to go get you some brisket or some smoked turkey. They are reopening, of course, closed this week. Happy Thanksgiving. They are opening Saturday and Sunday. So if you need to get out of the area, out of the house, out of the in-law space, out, whatever, you just need a break from the kids, the dog, all the takes and the ties. If you need to get out, they're open back up on Saturday from 11 to 3 on Saturday and Sunday. So go watch some football. And eat you some brisket. If you didn't get any of his Thanksgiving brisket, I highly recommend, of course. And if you want some beverages for a Titans game that may cause you to drink, or maybe Tennessee Volunteers or an Iron Bowl or an Egg Bowl, all of which cause many college football fans to drink, make sure you go to Sinker's Beverages and pick up one of those good bottles of wine for your in-laws. They got great bourbon selection and an award-winning craft beer retail fridge. So go check all that great stuff out from Sinker's. All right, quickly, another geek corner here. Real fast, because I do want to talk rivalry weekend with you. But yeah, let's get it up. There we go. Geek Corner brought to you by Sinker's Beverages. Can't get it on the screen and talk at the same time. It's very difficult to do that. All right. So I was in a discussion. Of course, this was inspired by two things. My conversation with PK on Monday's show about how I thought the rookies played well, and that I'm starting to buy into this being a pretty good rookie class for the Titans long term. And so PK kind of pushed back on that a little bit, which is totally fair. He had good arguments there. But then also I was looking at numbers, and both of these two teams have a lot of rookies that are going to play in this game. There could be 9 or 10 or 11 rookies that could play in this game for both teams combined. And so I thought, man, you know what? Tavondre Sweat's played in every single game. And considering the context around his prospect evaluation coming into the camp and the conversation, maybe unfairly around him, the fact that he's played in every game is a huge positive. The fact that their starting left tackle first-round pick has played in every game, and I'm not sure how many snaps he's missed, frankly, J.C. Latham. That's a huge positive. His total, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter abusing him last weekend, notwithstanding, he has been a really, really good pick and a clearly stabilizing the left tackle position, and has played in every game. Jarvis Brownlee, they lose 2 corners, and Jarvis Brownlee has played in every single game. And Jarvis Brownlee starting to show some big playability against Houston, even though he gave up the big one to Collins. So all of this sort of is why I dug into this. I looked at every single player drafted in this class. There are 13 players in this draft class who have played in all 12 games that their team has had, 13 total. Washington has 4 of them, which, you look at that draft class, you got the tight end out of Kansas State. I'm drawing a blank for his name, the fullback tight end out of Kansas State. Stinnett. He's been very, very good. Stinnott, maybe is his name. Jaden Daniels has been very, very good. They have done a really good job drafting and influxing talent around Daniels, not just the quarterback with the first-year coach. 63 rookies have played in all 11 of their team's games. So basically what I was trying to figure out is how many rookies have played in every game that they could have played in. And of all drafted rookies, 76 total NFL players, rookies, have played in every one of their team's games this year. Number 1 in the NFL is the Los Angeles Rams with 6. Hard to argue
and they had like 13 picks or something, right?
Yeah.
Didn't they just have a glut? Yeah.
But they have like 12 sacks out of their first two picks.
Sure.
Verse and Braden Fisk, a very appropriately named defensive tackle. So 6 players have played in every one of their games. No other NFL team has that. They're the only team in the NFL that has 6 rookies that have played in every single game.
Draft picks.
You know, draft picks. You know who's number 2 on the list in the entire NFL? You already know.
I do.
Teeing you up here.
Who
is it, Nick?
It's
the Titans. The Titans have 5 rookies that were drafted that have played in every single game. Jalen Harrell's one of the other ones.
Yeah. That was the one that surprised me. I had forgotten that Jalen had been up and had played in every game.
And frankly, Jaquan Jackson has played football in every game. I'm not sure he has contributed to football in every game. But again, he's on there. But if you told me that your first round pick, your second round pick, and a 5th round corner were all going to play in every single game, and you were going to be second in the NFL in terms of total number of players, rookies drafted that are playing in every game, I would say that was a huge success for Rand Carthon. The Philadelphia Eagles are the other team that have had 5. And then if you look at the next group of teams, it's Chicago, San Francisco, Arizona, and Washington have all had 4 rookies play in every single game. So Titans and Washington, 9 total rookies drafted that have played in every single game, among the best in the NFL. And it's not, I don't do that to like prove PK wrong. That's not what I'm saying. He was right about what he was saying about the games, like Jackson turning the ball over, Latham having a bad game. Like there were some mistakes by the rookies in the last week's game.
Yeah.
But I think it is a sign of good. It's a good positive sign. And then the context around it, I thought was really interesting to say, look, Rand's done a really good job. They got more rookies playing every single Sunday than anybody else in the league, minus the Rams.
Sure. And you can take this 2 ways. You can say these guys were ready to play and you give them credit for drafting pro-ready players, or you can say the Titans needed bodies. So there are 2 ways about it. This team had depth concerns, so it's not a surprise that you can have somebody like Jaquan Jackson or somebody like Jalen Harrell or even somebody like Brownlee, who wasn't starting those first 3 weeks, but had to play on special teams and had to play as a rotational piece. They needed depth bodies, and these players have been adept at it. And I would bet James Williams has played in 9 of 11 games just on the necessity to play a guy. I would bet am I missing one draft pick, or is it just Cedric Gray beyond that? I think might be it. But
it's 5, 6, 7. I think they had 7 picks, right?
I think they had 7. So yeah, I mean, you have asked a lot of your rookies because there was not very much veteran depth on this team. But that does not negate the fact that Sweat's playing his best football right now. Up until last week, Latham had looked like a future stud almost every week. Brownlee is figuring things out. You've got some players who are contributing well.
There you go.
Geek Corner.
Geek Corner, Part 2. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue.
We don't print merch. We just have sheets of paper and whiteboards.
Whiteboards are the way to go. Okay. All right, let's look at quickly. We got rivalry weekend college football, so I want to go quickly with this because I do want your experiences in the Egg Bowl. Like, it is a fascinating game to cover, just in general. But the rankings came out. I think the big takeaway from the chaos last weekend is that Georgia and Tennessee, should they win against quality rivals this weekend, Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt, they are all but locked in to playoff spots. They move up to 7 and 8 in the rankings. If they win, they should stay in the rankings. I think it was good news for Notre Dame, Miami, SMU. What happened last week? Indiana as well. All of them should be in if they win their final games. SMU and Miami will play in the ACC title game. It does feel like, Clemson's 12, Bama's 13, Ole Miss is 14, South Carolina 15. It does feel like at the best case scenario, it's probably Clemson, Bama, and Ole Miss for 1 spot. Is that how you see the rankings in terms of what's going to happen the final week and then championship weekend?
I would be a little bit more willing than you to put South Carolina in that bunch because of the way the committee seems to be valuing big wins. So if you give South Carolina 1 more win, maybe that could have them jump Alabama and Ole Miss, even though the head-to-head losses, I'm skeptical. But I could see it if you're talking very pragmatically and not at all about Bama bias, because we're not talking about Bama bias and we don't need to talk about Bama bias. But
no, we don't.
Yeah, I would say that's probably fair, that those 3 teams have the best edge.
Who is better, Alabama or Ole Miss? This goes back to your I've watched the games eye test thing. I'm serious. I have no idea. One day I lean Alabama, the next moment I lean Ole Miss. I think my instinct trusts Alabama more,
Is
but
it worse to
I don't know.
lose because you can't get out of your own way or because the other team just bullies you? Because like Ole
Yes.
Miss has lost 3 games because Ole Miss has beat itself 3 times. Like that's not to take anything away from Florida or from Kentucky or from LSU, but all 3 times, if Ole Miss could gain a yard, they win the game.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I think that it's a little bit better indicator when Ole Miss is arguably the best team in college football from the 20-yard line to the 20-yard line, and then everything falls apart, that they are probably the better team. But I trust Alabama more because Alabama doesn't make the mistakes that make them lose. They just get beat.
Alabama's performance against Oklahoma was the worst of both teams, but Ole Miss's loss to Kentucky is the reason they get left out of the playoff. If they don't make the playoff, it has nothing to do with losing to Florida close on the road or losing to LSU close on the road. Those two are very explainable. It makes sense. Those are just regular college football outcomes. Losing at home to a potential 4-8 Kentucky team, that's not going to go over well with the committee, in my opinion.
Very bad.
But Bama's performance is so recent and it was so freaking ugly that it's going to be hard to get that out of your head as well, which is why I actually think if Clemson beats South Carolina, Clemson is the one they lean on, even though Clemson was destroyed by Georgia. I think a win over South Carolina is going to prop Clemson up, and I think Clemson's the one that gets in, even though I think Bama might be better. It's also easy for the committee to say 3 losses. Like you have to put yourself in the shoes of the committee. What is easiest to explain to people? I know that's not how we're supposed to be establishing these rankings, but you have to go out of your way to explain why you put Bama in, whereas you don't have to go out of your way to explain why you put Clemson in my opinion. I don't think you have to. So
and
now,
just side note, while we've got Clemson up, just soft launching a take that'll be more important next year. Cade Klubnik might just be Bo Nix too. If he's back next year. Like, he's just a guy who is slowly getting better every year, and we remember what the heck, cat? We remember how much we remember how much the freshman year struggles and the early career struggles kind of flavored our opinion of the guy. But he is just steadily getting better. And if he plays another year of college football next year, I wouldn't be surprised if he's just like, oh crap, is he good? Is he like actually really, really good?
I know you don't drink, but I might need a couple glasses of whiskey and after the Clemson South Carolina game to really process that take, because I am torn on multiple takes that are coming together on this take, which is that I do believe that quarterbacks who play a ton of football in college should be valued more going into the draft. Bo Nix is a perfect example of that. But I've also seen, like, I agree that Cade Klubnik at Clemson, the quarterback, has gotten slowly better. But it's been really, really slow.
It has.
And it's only been like the problem is Bo Nix played a ton of great football, and Cade Klubnik has not played a lot of great football against meaningful competition. That's my issue with that. I like where you're going with it, and they're the kind of takes that I like doing shows with you for, and I want to spend some time with it. But I might need to. I might need to do some like ayahuasca though to like really. To really kind of ponder that one, because I'm not quite there yet on Cade.
Just
Klubnik.
Look at your hands for a long time and think, is Cade Klubnik Bo Nix too?
It's a tie. So Egg Bowl. What's it like covering the Egg Bowl?
There's this book that I read a couple of years back called I Was There, where it is just a collection of probably 200 sports writers that were all asked the question, tell me the story of the 5 best things you've ever covered, 5 best games you have ever been at in person. There is no doubt in my mind that no matter what happens for the rest of my career, the 2019 Egg Bowl is locked into one of my 5 spots, if not locked into number 1. The Elijah Moore game is the most consequential sporting event. It changed the course of human history. If you told me that caused COVID, I probably wouldn't push back.
So a touchdown celebration caused COVID. We figured it out.
I'm not pushing back.
It has nothing to do with China. Nothing to do with China. We solved it. The Department of Defense. Come on in, boys. Let's go.
This isn't science. This is vibes. But like covering an Egg Bowl, my first one was the benches clearing brawl with A.J. Brown and Jeffrey Simmons and Jonathan Abram and Matt Corral et al.
This game is insane. This game is so nuts.
it does not get the respect it deserves because it's kind of viewed as a sideshow, and that's fair. Everything about Ole Miss and Mississippi State tends to be sideshow adjacent, but like when it comes to the quality
you just talked about sorry to interrupt. You just talked about a benches clearing brawl and a touchdown celebration that involved a dog rooting the rug that really tied the room together. That's
sideshow. That is circusy.
Right. Okay.
But the intensity of the rivalry is what begets the sideshow. And I just give so much credit to the people in that state. I know a lot of people who live in Oxford, Mississippi. I know a lot of people who live in Starkville. There are a ton of people who live in Oxford who are going to, with a straight face, look at you and say, well, actually, LSU is our biggest rival. And those people are pretentious and weird. And I'm talking directly to one of my closest friends in the world. Stop it. Stop it. I know what you're trying to say. And
you're going to get a feedback.
Yeah. Logically, I get it, man. I get what you're trying to say. But the Egg Bowl is special. It is. I've never been to a Iron Bowl, for example. I've been to rivalry games. I've never been to that one. I've never been to Ohio State, Michigan. I can't speak to the individual feeling, but I can speak to the feeling of being a reporter and sitting in the freezing cold, open air Davis Wade press box on Thanksgiving night as cowbells are ringing as loud as possible. And Elijah Moore scores that touchdown and everything goes silent for a second. And then he gets down on all fours and lifts his leg. And I look over at my editor who is sitting next to me, and my editor who's sitting next to me looks over at me, and he just says, go. And you write 100 stories all at once about the most consequential touchdown celebration in college football history. Is it more consequential than the Miami finger guns? Like it's
Desmond
Howard's up there.
Desmond Howard's up there. That's an interesting question.
In
most consequential TD celebration.
In 2020, there was a period where Mississippi was trying to change its state flag, and they allowed citizens to submit, and that was a mistake. And so I went through thousands upon thousands of Mississippian citizen submissions for what the state flag should be. And the best one by far, you can find this on my Twitter. There's a thread of all of the best fan made
is a dog lifting his leg.
Is Elijah Moore lifting his leg. And so all good. It says, the only block of text on the flag is in rainbow Comic Sans, the words, "In God We Trust." It's Elijah Moore lifting his leg, rainbow Comic Sans, "In God We Trust." And the fact that that's not the state flag is so galling. It's the best thing.
Nice
it's
word
almost better than a tie.
Oh, man. God, there's so many political jokes to be made about a Confederate flag being brought down and then using rainbow font around a college football game. It is what a fascinating state in general. My uncle is from a very small town in between Starkville and Oxford, and he is a literal rocket scientist. So like worked in Oak Ridge, like when I was in college on like the U.S. like, secret nuclear projects, all the stuff that we do at nuclear power plants that are like, making weapons and shit. Literally a rocket scientist, but he grew up in the 50s, in the 60s, in the civil rights era in the state of Mississippi. And he is a very sort of progressive, like drove from Starkville as a student to Oxford when the James Meredith thing happened. Yeah. And so it's just a fascinating, state. A lot of the South is like this, but Mississippi seems to be more steeped in the struggle and in the back and forth and the culture and the history. And it's very conflicting when you talk, like, to me, being that in love with college football and understanding what Elijah Moore's logo would look like and what it means to two sides of a state. And then also going from a Confederate flag to rainbow font. To me, that is like I agree with you. It's like the perfect embodiment of the entire state of Mississippi.
There is nothing that brought me more joy than getting to experience the fallout of that moment.
Yeah.
Of just being on the field after the game and everybody looking around and be like, man, they really lost because they couldn't hit a 38-yard extra point after a PP celebration. That's
it really tied the room together. It really tied the room together. So you mentioned like one of the things I say about rivalries, and not just in the SEC, I don't think that any one rivalry inside of the fan base, like there's certain ones that once you reach a certain level of quality and vitriol and history, that I don't think anyone is like more than the other. I don't think Ole Miss fans hate Mississippi State fans any less than Auburn fans hate Alabama fans, or any less than Ohio State fans hate Michigan fans. For example, I have been to 3 or 2 Texas A&M games when I was living in Austin as a middle school kid playing football. You grow up not learning your mama so fat jokes in Austin. You grow up learning Aggie so dumb jokes. Like that's what you learn. And I don't think there's any less hatred in the Texas A&M rivalry than there is in any of these rivalries that we're talking about. I think they're as good as each other. I think it's unfair to sort of say like, oh, I think Kentucky and Louisville fans probably don't hate each other as much as Mississippi State fans. Like, I just don't think that's fair. I think all these fan bases hate each other about the same amount. Now, is Auburn, Alabama more impactful, more meaningful in the national championship race, more meaningful in the SEC race? Higher profile, more fans, bigger fan bases, etc. Yeah, that's true. But I don't think the hatred within those fans is any less for the Egg Bowl or for South Carolina. I think South Carolina Clemson is one of the most underrated, like in-state hated rivalries that we don't talk about as much. So I think these games are all insane. Texas A&M. I'm not going to ask for a prediction. Just enjoy it, everybody. If you're an SEC fan and you've never seen it before, which if you're under a certain age, you probably haven't seen these two teams play. But go check it out. Yeah, there's Elijah Moore.
If you see the "In God We Trust" on the top corner.
I can't see it. On the top left? Okay. Oh, it needs to be bigger and bolder. It needs to be all the way across the bottom there. It needs to be all the way across the bottom. We're going to work on the graphic design, but I appreciate that you have that on the phone. Ready to go. Texas A&M is just so good. I do think Texas is locked into the playoff no matter what happens here, because if they lose, they don't go to the SEC championship game. The fact that this game is going to be played for the first time in 12 years, it's a less than a touchdown underdog. A&M is at home in their stadium, and sort of they're the underdog, and the winner goes to play in the SEC championship game. I just think you couldn't ask for bigger stakes and a better return to the rivalry. So my advice to everybody is just enjoy it. If you're not a fan of the two teams, just enjoy it, because you're going to want to remember this. I think A&M wins. I've been saying it since March. I'm guaranteeing Texas A&M win, so I'm going to stick with it. I don't know why I would change. To your point about your thoughts about Washington and Titans, to bring it all full circle, I have thought since they scheduled the game that A&M was going to win this game, and I'm going to stick with it. I think they win the game. So
cool. I'm trying to be agnostic to this game, because there is absolutely nothing that I can say that isn't going to make me sound dumb eventually. This game's going to be weird.
I agree. Very unpredictable. Tennessee, Vanderbilt, also huge. Georgia Tech, also huge. Both of them win. They get into the playoff. Arkansas, Missouri is a really interesting game. Florida State. Billy Napier can get to 7 wins, baby. That's an interesting one. Oklahoma, LSU is fascinating for offseason narratives purposes. Going to have some really big narratives for the team that loses that game. Really interesting stuff there. So great weekend of rivalry action. Enjoy it all. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Safe travels getting to and from wherever you're going. We do appreciate you, and best of luck with all the family and friends coming into your house. Nick, do appreciate you hanging out. Go to the Tennessean, sign up for good journalism, Tennessean.com, and of course, Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Support good local businesses, everybody. Any parting words of wisdom? Ties are great.
Root for ties. Yeah. Always root for the tie. If you don't have a rooting interest, root for the tie.
It's a science. It's science. All right. For Nick, I am Braden. Thank you guys for hanging out and for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week. Peace and love.